In the spring of 1945, soldiers of the French army walked through the gates of a rifle factory in the small town of Oberndorf am Neckar in the hills of southern Germany. For a decade, that factory had built the standard rifle of the German army. Within a year, the men who owned it would be forbidden from ever building a weapon again. 4 years after that, 3 of its own engineers would reopen those same gates under a different name and go on to build the rifle that armed half of NATO. The factory belonged to Mauser, a name that had supplied German soldiers with rifles since the century began. Mauser's Karabiner 98K, adopted as the standard service rifle of the Wehrmacht in 1935, became the most common firearm carried by German troops through the whole of the Second World War. Mauser and a handful of subcontractor firms built more than 14 million of them between 1934 and 1945, an output so large that the rifle remained in circulation on battlefields around the world for decades afterward. Mauser's Oberndorf works also built the Luger pistol, known as the P08, the German military standard sidearm since 1908. Production of the Luger returned to Mauser in 1930 and continued at Oberndorf until 1943, 3 years after the Walther P38 had already replaced it as the officially preferred sidearm for German officers. By the time the war ended, the Mauser name was inseparable from the army that Adolf Hitler had sent across Europe. When French troops entered Oberndorf on the 20th of April 1945, the town's mayor surrendered without a fight, and the factory was placed under French military administration. For French occupying forces, the immediate problem was not punishment, but supply. French units needed rifles, and Mauser's production lines, though battered, were still largely intact. Under French control, the factory built just under 52,000 Kar 98K rifles between May of 1945 and June of 1946, along with several thousand Luger pistols assembled from parts already on hand. For a little more than a year, the company that had armed the Wehrmacht kept working, this time arming the men who had defeated it. That arrangement did not last. The Allied powers had already agreed that Germany would never be allowed to rearm itself, and the same policy applied in every occupation zone. In the American, British, French and Soviet zones alike, arms factories were seized, their machine tools shipped out as reparations or destroyed on the spot, a deliberate effort to make sure the country that had armed 2 world wars could never arm a third. Under that policy, Germany was barred outright from manufacturing or developing weapons of any kind. In Oberndorf, the local French army commander went further than the policy required. He ordered the factory torn down. Roughly 60% of Mauser's buildings were demolished, its machine tools seized as war reparations, and its company records deliberately destroyed, erasing decades of engineering drawings, along with the machinery itself. The firm that had built 14 million rifles for Hitler's army was left standing in ruins, its name barred from the very trade that had built it. For the men who would work there, the ban was not a fine or a sentence, it was permanent. Under the terms set by the occupying powers, no German firm was to make arms again, not for a year, not for 5 years, but for as long as the restriction held. While the factory sat empty, 3 of Mauser's own former engineers refused to let the skill inside it disappear. Edmund Heckler, Theodor Koch and Alex Seidel had all worked in Oberndorf during the war, and in 1948 the 3 men salvaged what tools and machinery they could from the wreckage and opened a small engineering workshop inside the emptied plant. Barred from touching a firearm, they built what the ban allowed instead: sewing machine parts, bicycle components and precision tools for other factories kept the lights on and the workforce paid. On the 28th of December 1949, the 3 men formally registered their operation under a new name, Heckler and Koch. The gunmaker that had armed the Third Reich was gone. In its place stood a machine shop with no rifles to its name, run by the same hands that had built millions of them. The restriction on German arms production loosened only in stages. In 1952, broader industrial limits on West Germany were lifted, but weapons manufacturing stayed forbidden. It was not until 1955, when the Allied occupation of West Germany formally ended, that the ban on German arms production was lifted at last. The same year, West Germany joined NATO and began rebuilding an army of its own, the Bundeswehr. for the express purpose of standing alongside the same nations that had once occupied it. For Heckler and Koch, the timing opened a door the founders had waited 7 years to walk through. The rifle that gave the new company its start had a strange path of its own. Late in the war, Mauser engineers, among them a designer named Ludwig Vorgrimler, had worked on an experimental rifle known as the Sturmgewehr 45, built around a roller-delayed locking system nobody had finished perfecting before Germany surrendered. Vorgrimler carried that unfinished design first to France, then on to Spain, working for years outside Germany because the same ban that shut Mauser's doors also barred him from continuing the work at home. In Spain, the design matured into the Spanish Army's CETME rifle. When West Germany went looking for a new service rifle in the 1950s, the Bundeswehr tested the CETME design against a Swiss rifle and an American one, and in January of 1959 chose the Spanish design. Heckler and Koch built it under license for the German army, chambered in the 7.62mm NATO round, and named it the G3. The company that had been forbidden from making a single rifle now supplied the standard rifle of the army that had once occupied its own factory. The G3 did not stay a German weapon for long. Over the following decades, it was built under license in more than a dozen countries, among them Pakistan, Brazil, Iran, Portugal, Sweden, Turkey and Mexico, until worldwide production reached somewhere near 7.5 million rifles. A design nobody had finished at the end of one war became one of the most widely manufactured rifles of the next several decades of peace and conflict alike. The G3 went on to arm the militaries of more than 60 countries and served as the Bundeswehr's standard rifle until it was replaced by Heckler and Koch's own G36 in 1997. Meanwhile, in 1966, a shortened submachine gun built on the G3's action, first tested by German special police and border guards under the name MP64, entered service as the MP5. Germany's own counter-terrorism unit, GSG-9, carried the weapon during the 1977 rescue of a hijacked Lufthansa airliner in Mogadishu, but the MP5 stayed a specialist tool known mostly within German policing circles for years after that. It became a household name in 1980 when British Special Forces stormed the Iranian embassy in London on live television during Operation Nimrod, carrying the MP5 into every living room watching. Within a decade, the weapon was standard issue for the American Delta Force, the Navy SEALs, the FBI, French counter-terrorism units, and dozens of police tactical teams across more than 40 countries, becoming one of the most recognized firearms ever built. The Mauser name itself never returned to military arms. It survives today only as a maker of civilian hunting rifles, now owned by a European sporting arms group. A quiet retirement for a name once stamped on 14 million rifles of war. Heckler and Koch, its true post-war successor, is a separate company built by separate men, on a separate band's ashes for a separate war that never came. A firm founded on machine parts and bicycle gears, born from the ruins of a rifle works the Allies had tried to erase, became the armourer of the alliance built to contain the country it once served. The Gunmaker banned for life did not return. In its place, its own engineers built something new, under a new name, and handed the rifles of the world to the very alliance formed to watch its old employer. Thanks for watching. If you like this, you will also enjoy our look at what happened to Germany's abandoned tanks after the war. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories of what happened after the guns fell silent.